Good evening, everyone. My name is Daniel Stoll, and I am Associate Dean for Academic Programs here at Georgetown University in Qatar. And on behalf of Dean Gert Naneman, I'm delighted to welcome you tonight to an evening that promises to be a very rich and stimulating one, filled with writing, reflection, reading, and the life of the mind. In 1995, Georgetown established a tradition at the Washington, D.C. campus whereby all incoming students are asked to read a contemporary novel by an international author during the summer prior to the year they enter studies at the university. Through reflective reading, participation in discussions about the novel with faculty colleagues, and meeting with the author, the students get an early taste of the intellectual life of the university. Here at Georgetown in Qatar, we are now in our third year of following that same tradition. And this year, for the first time actually, our first-year students have read the same novel, In the Shadow of the Banyan, as their counterparts on the Washington, D.C. campus. Earlier this week, our newest students, the class of 2017, met in small groups to discuss the book and to hear some of the upperclassmen colleagues of theirs who visited Cambodia in 2012 as part of Georgetown's Zones of Conflict, Zones of Peace program. Today, we all have the extraordinary opportunity to meet with the author, Vaddey Ratner, and our students met with her over lunch to ask her questions and continue the conversation. In total, over 1,800 Georgetown first-year students in the United States and in Doha have joined you in reading this very compelling book that we are about to hear more about tonight. Another tradition we have established at Georgetown in Qatar is that we ask one of our students to introduce each of our guests. I am very pleased to invite Isra El-Kamali to the podium to introduce our guest author and speaker for this evening. Isra is a first-year student who, like all of her classmates, has read and discussed the book as her first academic experience here at Georgetown.
Welcome, everyone. In the Shadow of the Banyan by Vaddey Ratner is a breathtaking, heartbreaking, and inspiring novel. Vaddey Ratner is a Cambodian genocide survivor, a genocide that took away the life of 2 million people, and which was committed by the Khmer Rouge. The author was 5 years old when the Khmer Rouge came to power in 1975. Although her father was the great-grandson of the king, her and her family members went through a 4-year tragedy of starvation, separation, forced labor, execution, and death, after being forced to leave her hometown. After years of suffering, Vaddey Ratner and her mother escaped while many of her family members were perished. In 1981, she arrived in the US as a refugee. The author graduated from Cornell University, where she specialized in Southeast Asian history and literature. When I read In the Shadow of the Banyan, I felt as if a spell was cast upon me. I couldn't keep my hands away from the book, and I would read some lines over and over again just to keep feeling the impact of the beautiful words and expressions in my heart and soul. Sometimes, when authors tend to describe the environment or the tropical nature that is mentioned in the story, I find it hard to visualize or picture the places and images in my head. For I have lived in Qatar for 13 years. But while reading In the Shadow of the Banyan, the author's methods of writing made it easier for me to visualize the beautiful words to visualize the beautiful nature of Cambodia. I could almost feel the wetness of the monsoon season, the raindrops, the sound of the wind and thunder. I felt as if I was there, breathing in the fresh tropical air while sitting beside a temple under the blazing morning sun. I could feel the presence of the mighty mountains, the sound of the grass swaying in the air, and the scent of the flowers. I basically read with all my senses. In the Shadow of the Banyan is a story that many people around the world could in some parts relate to. The banyan tree was a symbol for safety and shelter in this book, which as an Iraqi, I can personally relate to. The palm trees in Iraq were the equivalent of the banyan trees in Cambodia, in which during the Gulf War, my siblings used to seek refuge under the palm tree and would wait for my mother to walk to the river and get water for us. The book has touched me in many ways, emotionally, intellectually, socially, and spiritually. And towards the end of the book, the verse of the Quran kept repeating in my head, which says, "Verily, verily then, with every hardship comes ease." So I hope that everyone enjoyed reading the book and learned many valuable life lessons. And to those who still didn't read the book, I hope you do after the end of today's event. So now, let me introduce you to the author, Vaddey Ratner, who will be interviewed by Donna Hansen, Associate Director at the Georgetown University Library. Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum. Good evening. Welcome.
Well, welcome again to another author evening that we're having here at Georgetown with Vaddey Ratner. I'm Donna Hansen, one of the people that helps to organize this, and it is my immense pleasure and privilege to be able to be up here on stage to talk with Vaddey tonight. As Dean Stoll explained, the students have read the book, they've met in groups, they've met with the author, they've had a lot of opportunity to read the book, think about it, and talk to Vaddey, and now it's our turn. We get you.
Yes. I'm ready.
Our format for this evening is Vaddey and I will have a short discussion about the novel. She has agreed to read some passages out of the book and set the tone for us. And we will certainly have time for audience questions, following a book signing and a reception in the library. Okay. Now, Vaddey, it is a bit difficult sometimes in Doha to obtain books, so there will be a number of people in the audience that haven't had a chance to read it.
Yes.
Could you give us a brief synopsis of the book, just to set the tone before we get into some discussion?
Okay. In The Shadow of the Banyan is set in Cambodia. It's a narrative about the genocide period in Cambodia in the mid-1970s, those 4 years from 1975 to 1979. While the context is war and revolution, what I wanted to achieve with this story is a much more universal story about the unbreakable bonds of family, about the enduring power of hope and love, and most of all about the transcendent power of story and storytelling. Story as a form of our continuity, a story as a means of survival. And when survival is not possible, how does stories help us to continue some aspects of ourselves, our history, our family, our country. So this is what is this is the essence of In the Shadow of the Banyan that I have tried to capture.
Thank you. Now, Isra mentioned in her introduction that the imagery that really grabbed her, that made her understand the book and feel it.
Yes.
I was just looking at one page in the book, one chapter in the book, and I'm going to read just a couple of images here.
Okay.
A spider peered from beneath her dew-glistened web. An unsuspecting praying mantis, serene as a diver contemplating an early morning plunge into the cool sea. A pair of back swimmers, circus acrobats. One paragraph, one page, I could have picked any page in that first part of the book, and has lovely images. Did that come naturally to you? Is that the way you think? Is that the way Cambodia makes you think? Or do you really have to work at each one of those absolutely amazing images?
I would say the answer to that is all of the above. I was taught at a very young age to see the world in a way that I think corresponded with me as a child. Often children feel very insignificant. And what was special about my relationship with my father was he taught me from an early age to observe the insignificant lives, and to see that those are just manifestations of the larger lives. So I was taught, and it was a very conscious effort on the part of my father. But also I think Cambodian culture and Cambodians' relationship to nature is a very personal one. I was telling the student this afternoon that when I go back to Cambodia, I become the child of that land again, and I become very humbled in my relationship to that land. In America, I can go to a lake, to a park, to the beach, and not think twice about who do I answer to in terms of asking for permission of this place. I just feel that it's all public space, it's belonged to me. But in Cambodia, I feel that there is a spiritual entity that's larger than what we can imagine. And the moment I step out of my house, the moment I step off of my car, I enter a land that I don't know whether it's a farmer's land or the woods. I always ask permission to that entity out there to step into it, realizing that this world doesn't belong to me alone. It belongs to not only beings that I can see, that I can witness, that I can touch, but to beings that I cannot see. So.
Thank you. Now, you've written this book in English, which is your second language.
Yes.
But you have interwoven a lot of Cambodian language into it.
Yes.
How did you make the decision when to use an English word, when to revert to Cambodian? How did you come up with the process of keeping the reader engaged, but still putting in the words that you felt were needed?
Much of it is intuitive. When you write, you often you work in silence at first, but then once you finish a sentence or a paragraph, and the way I say finish a sentence, because the sentence can sometimes take you a week, you get very obsessed with words and getting it right, and not only just the words, but the rhythm, the tone, the feelings that you try to invoke. So in terms of language, I feel it's very intuitive. As a writer, you have, to quote Ezra, as a writer, you write with all your senses, the same way that a reader reads. You have to employ all of that. But a part of it, then, you step back, and sometimes you go up with a particular word or particular phrase in your own language, and you are just in love with it, but then you feel like this is not going to translate well. Then you make the hard decision as a writer. You step outside for a moment of yourself as an artist, and you become much more methodical, much more technical in the sense of how will this translate in another tongue, with another ear listening to it. And so you make these kind of decisions, but most of it, I think, intuitively, and you get used to that. What will work and what will not work.
So it felt right.
Yes, what feels right. And I think, this is metaphorical or representative of life in general. There's no one right answer. I think you have to know yourself, and you have to be able to translate yourself into the world, the language where your expression become not just something that belongs to you personally, but can somehow translate into a much more universal articulation.
Thank you very much. One of the things that many of the students commented on was the fact that this story is told from the point of view of a 7-year-old.
Yes.
Really made it work for them.
Yes.
That's what brought them in.
Yes.
How did you decide to write it as a 7-year-old and to use that voice as opposed to an adult telling the novel?
Yes. Well, First of all, there was the practical, the reason that was based on reality. The reality was I was only 5 when the Khmer Rouge came in, took power. And you know, as a 5-year-old, you're very young, and so you remember things in a way. Most 5-year-olds remember things with acute emotional clarity, but not with detail clarity. But this is a story that I feel cannot be told by a child. It deals with very grave matters. It deals with genocide. It deals with the destruction of a society. It deals with one's own people perpetrating that destruction. And so I feel that I need a mature voice, but the perspective of someone who has not acquired the prejudices of the world. And I remember reading books like To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee and thinking Scout was 7. And I read that book, I think probably, I don't know, 1 million times. And but also, I began to understand or cross that threshold from being a child into an adult halfway through the regime. I remember this. And figuring out halfway through the regime, I was probably around 7. Throughout the regime, I had no sense of how old I was. I could only guess just by the season. I had an idea maybe, I was 8 or 9, but you know, at the end, of course, when we were told that the Khmer Rouge had lasted almost 4 years, then I figured out, I'm 9 now, but I felt so much older. So in writing, I wanted to achieve many different things at the same time. And it's really important for me, especially when you write about a place like Cambodia that has become so well known, but known in such a negative way. You know, I remember feeling so sad in the American popular culture, like James Bond's or, you know, a New York sitcom, Friends. The only reference to Cambodia was the negative stuff, Pol Pot, the killing fields, and all these things. And I kept feeling that there's more to my country than that. And so in writing, I really, really wanted to give an opportunity for the reader to just erase their preconceptions of this place and start fresh, like a child observing the world, but with the capacity to, not so much to understand, but to observe everything that's happening around her.
Well, it seems a very good choice.
Thank you.
To use Ramia's voice.
Thank you.
And now would you give us some of Rami's thoughts from you?
Yes, well, what I thought I would do is, because we have a mixed audience here in the sense of some of you have read the novel and some of you have not, and so I have chosen several passages that will give a sense of the trajectory of the narrative as well as illustrate the larger themes of war and destruction, loss and continuity, and of course our indomitable will to survive. The book opens with a scene within the family household compound, a very lush and beautiful setting in the Cambodian capital, Phnom Penh, or as we Americans recognize, Phnom Penh. It's March 1975, and while the civil war rages outside their gates, in fact, all over the country, it's, again, I cannot stress this enough, it's very important to me that the story open to a more peaceful and intimate atmosphere. I wanted to give a glimpse of Cambodia before it became the killing field, a glimpse of a world before it disappears. The story is told through the perspective of a child, and again, the perspective, to me, perspective and voice are two different things. In the voice of an adult narrator inhabiting her childhood self. Hence, you have a rather mature narrative language. Rami is a 7-year-old protagonist, the daughter of a prince and a poet, and while her life has been one of privilege and protection, that world is now threatened, and she struggles to understand. So this is the opening to the book. War entered my world not with the blasts of rockets and bombs, but with my father's footsteps as he walked through the hallway, passing my bedroom toward his. I heard the door open and shut with a soft click. I slid off my bed, careful not to wake Ratna in her crib, and snuck out of my room. I pressed my ear to the door and listened. Are you all right? Mama sounded concerned. Each day before dawn, Papa would go for a solitary stroll, and returning an hour or so later, he would bring back with him the sights and sounds of the city, from which would emerge the poems he read aloud to me. This morning, though, it seemed he came back as soon as he had stepped out, for dawn had just arrived and the feel of night had yet to dissipate. Silence trailed his every step like the remnant of a dream long after waking. I imagine him lying next to Mama now, his eyes closed as he listened to her voice, the comfort it gave him amidst the clamor of his own thoughts. What happened? Nothing, darling, Papa said. What is it? She persisted. A deep, long sigh. Then finally he said, the streets are filled with people, Anna. Homeless, hungry, desperate. He paused, the bed creaked, and I imagine him turning to face her, their cheeks on the same long pillow as I'd often seen. The miseries, no matter what awfulness is out there, Mama cut in gently. I know you will take care of us. Unfortunately, not long after this, the Khmer Rouge stormed into the city and seized control of the country. Rami and her family are forced outside of their home, along with the entire urban population, which was about 2 million by then from the influx of refugees from the countryside to back toward the countryside. So this is a scene from the mass exodus. Revolutionary soldiers were everywhere, dressed in black from head to toe, like the one who had burst through our gate, waving their guns, ordering everyone to leave. Families poured into the streets, dragging suitcases crammed with belongings, cradling baskets stuffed with dishes and cooking pans, wooden stools and chamber pots. A woman balanced 2 baskets on a bamboo pole over her shoulders, a child in one basket and a stove in another. We came to a huge crowd gathered in front of a tall wrought iron gate, behind which I could see part of the facade of a white pillared villa. People pushed and shoved one another, fighting to get through the entrance. Those up front banged on the iron bars, pleading to be let in. Some tried to climb over the high wall, cutting themselves on the sharp metal prongs lining the top edge. A few made it over, but most were pulled back down by the competing hordes below. 2 men punched each other, then 2 more, 3. A fight broke out. Women screamed, children whimpered and howled like puppies. A shot resounded. Weeks into her journey, Rami and her family arrive at a temple, a Buddhist temple. Here, amidst the lovely surroundings, Rami senses that even in their exile, home is still possible, that home is not constructed of walls and pillars alone, but of something more intangible. She begins to discover a home constructed of dreams and stories. Papa's eyes went to the pair of carved serpents along the balustrades. The Naga, he said, from the Sanskrit Nagara for city or kingdom, is a symbol of divine energy, our link to the heavens. This place, this land of Naga pillars and steeples and spires, was born of divine inspiration. So goes one legend among many. My favorite story is one of Malia, the son of Indra and his earthly consort. One day, the 12-year-old Malia receives an invitation from his father to visit him. Papa looked up and pointed at the carved image of a mythical creature, part human and part bird, adorning the top of every pillar of the prayer hall. Perhaps on the wings of one of those, I like to imagine, Malia ascends the heavens. It's Ginara, I said, reminding him of the creature's name. From the countless tales I've read and heard, Ginara could traverse back and forth between the world of the humans and that of the gods. Yes, that's right, Papa nodded, smiling. Once there, Malia gazes in awe at his father's celestial kingdom, the many-tiered steeple palaces covered with precious stones, moats and pools shimmering as if made of liquid diamonds, causeways and bridges stretching to eternity and back. You will have your own earthly kingdom, Indra says to his son, in the image of this one. Whatever you so desire here, I shall send my celestial architect to replicate it. Malia, moved by his father's generosity, dares not request a replica of Indra's own palace. Instead, he humbly asks to recreate only Indra's cattle stable. That's it, just the cattle stable? My mind was roused by the story. Papa chuckled. But even Indra's cattle stable gave rise to the great Angkor temple, which became the inspiration for all later temples that adorn this land of your birth. You see, Rami, as beautiful as this temple is, it's only a tiny, modest glimpse of what is divinely possible in all of us. We are capable of extraordinary beauty if we dare to dream. I kept quiet now, imagining Papa as Indra and myself Malia. Do you know why I named you Watarami? He knelt on one knee and looked into my eyes. Because you are my temple, my garden, my sacred ground, and in you I see all of my dreams. He smiled, as if allowing himself the indulgence of an early morning's pondering. Perhaps it's natural for a father, for every parent, to see in his child all that's unspoiled and good. But if you can, Rami, I want you to see it in yourself. No matter what ugliness and destruction you may witness around you, I want you always to believe that the tiniest glimpse of beauty here and there is a reflection of the God's abode. It is real, Rami. There exists such a place, such sacred space. You have only to envision it, to dare to dream it. It is within you, within all of us. He straightened up again, letting out another long breath. I see it all the time. It was clear. If I looked hard enough, if I sought, I would find what I was looking for. I would find what I was looking for. Here on the banyan shaded ground, the temple harbored minute reflections of the paradise we had left behind. Much later in the book, perhaps 2 years have passed, this passage contrasts the earlier lush setting of home. The silent landscape echoes Rami's sense of fear and isolation. I also wanted the sparse language to mirror the emotional stripping down of Rami's journey. So pay particular attention to the language. There's no time to mourn. No time to look back. Again, planting season came. Mama was sent to another location to dig irrigation ditches, and I was put in a youth brigade that traveled from one area to the next, planting rice. There were about 20 of us in the group, all girls, and we worked from dawn until sunset. We slept together in one hut built at the edge of the forest near our work area. Our parents, we were told, couldn't be wasted caring for us. We were not children anymore. This morning at the rice fields, a new secret guard was assigned to keep an eye on us. He paced back and forth on the narrow dike, going nowhere, eyes watching. The long gun hanging from his shoulder brushed against the ground as he walked. A black cap shaded his eyes, and the muscles of his jaw flexed in and out on clenched teeth. He tried to look older than he was. If only he knew we were afraid of him, because he was so young. Around me, tiny figures in black rose and bent, up and down, up and down. A step or two back, the rhythm I could count and feel even in my sleep. We moved slowly, pushing rice shoots into the mud, burying the stalk halfway in the water. No one sang, no one spoke, no one looked up. We were just moving figures, up and down, up and down. I could no longer tell the living from the dead. Ours was a world in between. Silence took root in my blood. I became deaf. I became mute. I thought only of the work in front of me. Standing in the paddy, I planted the rice shoots. When eating, I could only think of eating. In sleep, I thought of nothing else. Hunger made my body frail. Many times I was punished for being too lazy. Without rice, I lived on leaves and small animals found in the mud. The tiniest I would swallow at once. Sometimes I would be punished, though I could never know when. It was futile to worry, to think of tomorrow. The life I've once known was gone, and with it, the people. There was nothing to say, no one left for me to speak of, so I chose not to speak. Still I saw, still I heard. In silence, I understood, and I remembered. To keep you is no gain, to kill you is no loss. Under the rules of the organization, we were reduced to this dictum. How was I to live by such words? With so many carted away on the tiniest pretense, how could any child believe she would live beyond this day, this moment? In a world of senseless death, I didn't see the purpose, couldn't grasp the meaning. If this was our collective karma, then why was I still alive? If anything, I was as guilty as those who survived and as innocent as those who died. What name then can I give to the force that carried me on? With each life taken away, a part of it passed on to me. I didn't know its name. All I could grasp was the call to remember. Remember, I lived by this word. I would like to conclude the reading with a poem that appears in the novel in the voice of Rami's father. They say mine is a ravaged land, scarred and broken by hate, on a path to self-extermination. Yet no other place so resembles my dreams of heaven, the lotus fields that cradle my home, each flower a reincarnated spirit, or perhaps like me, a child who wishes to be reborn, should dreams become possible again. Thank you.